Wait, I need to follow the rules. No preamble, no meta talk. Starting the story directly. Connor Hayes had been checked, also on the list. Let me silently verify names against the file and begin. Liam Beckett had spent 6 years learning that dignity was not something the world handed you. It was something you protected quietly on your own, especially on the mornings when nobody was watching and there was every reason to let it go. He had been running Beckett's Auto and Tire on the outskirts of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, since his wife Karen passed. Pancreatic cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to the end. Their daughter, Wren, had been 4 years old at the time, too young to understand what was happening, old enough to feel the shape of the absence it left behind. Liam was 38 now. The shop was modest by any measure. 2 bays, a small waiting area with a second-hand coffee maker that required a firm tap on the left side to get going, and a tool chest he had inherited from his own father, who had run a similar shop 2 towns over until his knees gave out. The floors were stained with decades of oil and honest work. The fluorescent light above Bay 2 flickered every 20 minutes like clockwork. Liam had replaced the bulb 3 times and eventually stopped trying. Every morning before 7, he unlocked the front door, switched on the lights, and got to work. Wren would arrive an hour later, dropped off by his neighbor, Mrs. Pollock, before school, and spend 40 minutes at the corner desk doing her reading while Liam handled the early appointments. It was a routine built from necessity that had quietly become something he loved. The shop didn't make him rich. Most months it made him exactly enough, with a narrow margin that he tried not to think about too hard. But people trusted him. That counted for something in a town like Moose Jaw, where trust moved slowly and lasted a long time once it was earned. On a Wednesday in late October, with the first real cold of the season pushing down from the north, a white Range Rover pulled into the lot. It moved like it didn't belong there, all clean lines and chrome trim, and it parked at an angle that blocked part of the service entrance. The woman who stepped out did not look around the way most people did when they arrived somewhere unfamiliar. She looked at her phone. Her name was Diane Ashworth. Liam would not know that immediately. He would learn it later, the way he learned most things, quietly after the fact, by paying attention. She was somewhere in her late 40s, dressed in a charcoal wool coat that probably cost more than Liam's monthly lease payment. Her hair was pulled back precisely. She wore the expression of someone who had been mildly inconvenienced and was managing it poorly. She explained briefly that the Range Rover had been making a sound. A grinding, intermittent, particularly noticeable when she turned left at speed. 3 dealerships in Regina had looked at it. 2 had told her it was nothing. 1 had told her it was the suspension and quoted her $4,000, which she had declined on principle. Liam nodded, asked her to leave the keys, and told her he would take a look. She did not ask how long it would take. She sat in the waiting area for 11 minutes, answered several emails, and then called someone and spoke in a low-clipped voice about a board meeting scheduled for the following Thursday. Wren, sitting at her desk with a chapter book open in her lap, glanced over once and then returned to her reading. Liam found the problem in under 30 minutes. The front left wheel bearing had been improperly seated, not worn out, simply installed incorrectly during a previous service. It was the kind of mistake that happened when someone was rushing. The fix required care and time, not expensive parts. He completed the repair, tested the vehicle through the back alley behind the lot, and confirmed the sound was gone. When he brought the invoice to the waiting area, the total was $220. Diane Ashworth looked at the paper. Then she looked at Liam. Then she looked back at the paper, the way someone does when they are preparing to argue. $220, she said. It was not a question. That's right, for a wheel bearing, for diagnosing it correctly and fixing it properly, Liam said. He kept his voice even. The bearing was misinstalled. I reseated it and tested the vehicle. The noise is gone. She set the invoice down on the waiting area table, slowly, the way people set things down when they want you to understand they are not impressed. I've been to 3 shops, she said. Nobody could figure this out. And you're telling me it took you half an hour. About that, yes, and you think that's worth $220? Lamb looked at her steadily. I think 30 years of knowing what to look for is worth $220, yes. Something shifted in her expression. Not softening, more like narrowing. She picked up her coat from the back of the chair and folded it over her arm. I'll tell you what, she said. Bill me. I don't run accounts for new customers. Well, she picked up her keys from the counter. Then I suppose you'll have to figure something out. She walked to the Range Rover, got in, and pulled out of the lot without looking back. The quiet she left behind had a specific texture. Not empty, weighted. Like the air before a weather change. Liam stood at the front window for a moment. Outside, the parking lot was ordinary and gray. Wren looked up from her book. "Dad," she said carefully. "Did she just leave without paying?" She did. Wren was 10 now. She had her mother's way of going very still when something bothered her, processing it before she spoke rather than after. "Are you going to call someone?" Lamb turned from the window. "I'm going to get back to work." "But she owes you money. She does. That's stealing." Lamb picked up a shop rag from the counter and wiped his hands, mostly out of habit. "It's a version of it. So why aren't you angry?" He thought about that honestly before answering. He was angry, in the way that left no heat, just a flat, tired recognition of something he had seen before. The way certain people move through the world as though other people's time and work existed at their convenience. "I'm disappointed," he said. Angry means you expected better and you're surprised. Disappointed means you hoped for better and you're not. Wren considered this with the seriousness she brought to most things. Mom used to say something like that. She used to say a lot of things. What would she say about this? Lamb looked toward the framed photo on the shelf above the coffee maker. Karen in her hiking jacket, laughing at something off-camera the summer before her diagnosis. He had put it there years ago, so she was part of the shop the way she had been part of everything else. She'd say let it go, he said. She'd say the kind of person who drives away without paying eventually carries that with her whether she knows it or not. Wren nodded slowly. "Do you believe that?" Liam smiled just slightly. On good days, he did not see the dark green sedan parked across the street. He was not meant to. The man inside had been sitting there since before the Range Rover arrived. He was in his mid-70s, with white hair and the kind of posture that suggested he had once been told to straighten up and had never stopped. His name was Edmund Ashworth. He was Diane's father, founder of Ashworth Capital, and a man who had spent 5 decades making decisions about people for a living. He had not planned to be in Moose Jaw. He had driven out from Regina that morning to visit an old associate in town, and had stopped for fuel at the station on the corner when he noticed the shop sign across the road. He had parked out of habit, old habits from years of watching rather than talking, and had been sitting with his coffee going cold when the Range Rover arrived. He had watched everything, the repair, the invoice, Diane's face, the keys, the exit. He had watched the mechanic stand at the window for a moment and then turn back to work. That was the part that stayed with him. Edmund had spent decades in rooms full of people who reacted to setbacks with noise, raised voices, dramatic gestures, long speeches about fairness. He had seen executives throw furniture. He had seen grown men dissolve into self-pity over smaller injustices. He had fired some of them. He had promoted others who handled themselves better. The man across the street had said nothing, done nothing theatrical, comforted his daughter and gone back to work. Edmund set down his coffee cup on the dashboard and sat for another minute, thinking. Then he picked up his phone and called his assistant. "Find out everything you can about a shop called Beckett's Auto and Tire on the south end of Moose Jaw," he said, "and the man who runs it." The rest of Liam's Wednesday passed the way most Wednesdays did. He replaced the brake lines on a farmer's half-ton. He diagnosed an oil leak on a delivery van and ordered the part. He stayed late to help his friend Douglas, who ran the hardware store down the block, with a recurring transmission issue that Douglas had been nursing along for 2 years. He did not charge Douglas for the extra time. He never did. That evening, he and Wren walked the 4 blocks home through the cold. She held his hand, which she still did without seeming to think about it, and told him about a project her class was doing on prairie ecosystems. She wanted to build a model of a wetland habitat. She had already started sketching the design in her notebook. "It's going to need real grass," she said. "Like actual dried grass, we can probably find some. And maybe a small light underneath so it glows a little. We can definitely find that." She thought about something for a moment. "Dad, do you think that lady felt bad after she left?" Liam watched their breath in the cold air. "I think some people feel things and don't let themselves know it." Wren turned this over. "That sounds uncomfortable. I imagine it is." She squeezed his hand once and let go when they reached the front steps, running up ahead to check if Mrs. Pollock had left any of the oatmeal cookies she sometimes brought over on Wednesdays. Liam stood outside for a moment before going in. The street was quiet. A neighbor's porch light came on. Somewhere 2 streets over, a dog barked twice and went silent. He thought about Karen the way he always did at the edges of the day. She would have known exactly what to say to Wren. She always has had. He was still learning to say the right things 6 years later, and some days he thought he was getting better at it, and other days he was less sure. He went inside. At that same hour, in a well-lit office on the 14th floor of a building in Regina, Edmund Ashworth was reading through a report his assistant had assembled in under 3 hours. It was thorough. Liam Beck, 38, widower, 1 daughter, age 10. Beckett's Auto and Tire operating for 9 years, the last 6 under his sole ownership following his wife's death. Licensed mechanic with additional certification in diesel diagnostics and hybrid systems. Reputation in the community, consistently described as honest, skilled, fair. Several instances noted of reduced or waived charges for customers in financial difficulty. No complaints on record with any licensing body. Shop financially solvent but operating with minimal buffer. Edmund read that last line twice. Financially solvent but operating with minimal buffer. He thought about the wheel bearing. He thought about $220. He thought about Diane's face when she picked up her coat. He had a daughter who had learned somewhere along the way that wealth was a kind of permission. He did not know exactly when that had happened, or how much of it was his fault. Probably some of it was. Parents were never entirely separate from the people their children became. But he had also, over a long life, learned to recognize something rarer than talent or ambition. He had learned to recognize character, and character, unlike most things, was consistent. It appeared in the small moments more reliably than in the large ones. Edmund put the report down and looked out the window at the city lights. Then he called Mason, his longtime legal advisor. "I need you to prepare a trust document," he said. "And I want it ready by Friday." "That's fast," Mason said. "It's not complicated," Edmund said. "I know exactly what I want to do." There was a pause. "Mind if I ask what prompted this?" Edmund looked at the report on his desk. "A wheel bearing," he said. He did not elaborate. Mason had worked for him long enough to know when not to ask follow-up questions. The following morning, Liam arrived at the shop to find Douglas waiting outside with 2 cups of coffee from the Tim Hortons on the corner. "Figured you could use one," Douglas said. "Always." They stood in the cold for a few minutes before Liam unlocked the door. Douglas was the kind of friend who did not require much conversation, which Liam appreciated. They had known each other since Liam moved to Moose Jaw, and Karen had liked Douglas immediately, which had settled the matter for Liam. Around 10 in the morning, an older woman named Patricia came in with a brake warning light that had been intermittently showing for 2 weeks. She was retired on a fixed pension and visibly anxious about what the cost might be. Liam checked the brakes and found one of the sensors had been knocked loose, probably when she'd clipped a curb, a 5-minute fix. He told her the sensor had come loose and he had reattached it. He handed her back the keys. "What do I owe you?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. "You were in and out in 10 minutes. She looked uncertain. "I can pay something. Next time you have a real problem, come back. That's payment enough." She left with her eyes slightly too bright and her hands wrapped around her keys like they were something precious. Liam did not think much of it. He went back to work on the van he had been servicing since 8. He did not know that a silver SUV was parked across the street with a clear sight line to the service bay. Edmund Ashworth had decided he wanted to see the man again before he signed anything. Reports were information. Watching was knowledge. He had always believed that. He sat with his coffee and watched the morning unfold. 3 customers came and went before noon. Each time he observed something, the way Liam explained things without condescension, the way he listened, the way he moved around the shop, efficiently, without wasted motion, with the particular ease of someone who had done the same work long enough that it had become a kind of language. Around noon, a teenager arrived on a bicycle with a flat tire. He could not have been older than 15. He leaned the bike against the wall and looked through the bay door with the uncertain expression of someone who wasn't sure if they were allowed to be there. Liam looked up. "What do you need?" The kid held up the rear wheel he had already removed. "Flat. I don't have any money on me, but I can come back Friday." Liam set down what he was doing. He took the wheel, found the puncture in under a minute, patched it with practiced efficiency, and handed it back. "You're good," he said. "Really?" The kid looked almost startled. "I can seriously pay Friday. Don't worry about it. Watch out for the stretch of 2nd Avenue near the rail crossing. There's gravel spread all over the shoulder." The kid thanked him 3 times and left at speed, standing on his pedals. Edmund sat in his vehicle and did not move for a long moment. He was thinking about his own father, a pharmacist in Saskatchewan, raised during a time when you did not turn people away if they needed something, and you had it to give. His father had died with very little money and an enormous amount of goodwill in the community where he had spent his entire working life. Edmund had always thought of that as a kind of tragedy. The goodwill didn't pay bills. He had spent his career ensuring that he would never be in that position. But sitting in a parking lot in Moose Jaw, watching a mechanic patch a teenager's bicycle tire without a second thought, he found himself wondering about the accounting he had always used. Whether some things accumulated in ways that balance sheets couldn't track. He called Mason again. "The amount," he said. "I want to increase it." There was a short pause. "By how much?" Edmund considered. "Make it 14 million. Another pause is longer this time." "Edmund, I know what I'm doing. I know you know what you're doing. I'm just..." It's the right number, Edmund said. Do the paperwork. That evening, Liam and Wren had soup for dinner and worked on her wetland project at the kitchen table. She had found dried cattails in a craft box Karen had left in the storage room, and she arranged them carefully in a shallow tray while Liam cut pieces of foam board for the base. What if I add a duck? Wren asked. A real one or a model one? She gave him the look she reserved for questions that did not require an answer. Model one, she confirmed. Obviously, he laughed. She looked pleased with herself the way she did when she had successfully made him laugh and bent back over her project. Later, after she had gone to bed, Liam sat at the kitchen table for a while with a cup of tea going cold. He looked at the bills stacked neatly at the corner of the counter. Hydro, lease, the new compressor he needed to replace before spring. He had the numbers roughly memorized. They were manageable, but only just, and only if nothing unexpected came up. He thought about the woman in the wool coat. He thought about $220. He did not think about it with anger. He thought about it the way you think about weather, something that had passed through and left the ground a little different than before. He rinsed his cup, turned off the kitchen light, and went to bed. He had no idea that by this time the following morning, his name would be in a legal document that would change the entire shape of his life. The next morning came in cold and clear, the sky above Moose Jaw the pale blue of early winter. Liam unlocked the shop at 6:50, switched on the lights, and started a pot of coffee. Wren was coming in later. It was a PA day, and Mrs. Pollock would bring her around 9. By 8, he had 2 cars in the bays and the radio going quietly in the background. The CBC morning show. Wren had made him switch from country music 2 years ago, and he had never switched back. He was midway through replacing a timing belt on a Subaru when he heard a vehicle pull into the lot. He kept working, expecting one of his regulars. When nobody came through the bay door after a minute, he ducked out to check. There were 3 vehicles in the lot, 2 black SUVs and a silver sedan he did not recognize. 2 men in suits were standing near the SUVs, and a third man, older, white-haired, with the unhurried posture of someone who was very seldom rushed, was walking across the lot toward him. Liam wiped his hands. The older man stopped a few feet away and extended his hand. Liam Beckett, that's me. My name is Edmund Ashworth. Liam recognized the name, not from personal experience, from the business pages. Ashworth Capital. A long career in private investment and infrastructure development. One of the more significant philanthropic presences in Saskatchewan, though he was not someone who sought attention for it. He was also, Liam suddenly understood, the father of the woman in the wool coat. I think, Liam said carefully, that you might be related to someone who was in here earlier this week. My daughter, Edmund said. He did not flinch from it. Yes. I owe you an apology on her behalf, though I suspect she'll need to offer one herself eventually. She doesn't owe me anything, $220 at minimum. It's fine. Edmund looked at him steadily. It isn't, actually. But I appreciate that you say so. He paused. May I come in? They sat in the small waiting area. Liam on the edge of the chair he usually left for customers, Edmund in the one beside it. One of the suited men brought in a leather briefcase and set it on the table, then stepped back outside. I was across the street when Diane came in, Edmund said. I didn't plan to be. I was on my way somewhere else, and I stopped. He looked around the waiting room with genuine attention, the way someone does when they want to understand a place, not simply occupy it. I watched the whole exchange. Liam did not say anything. And then I watched you afterward, Edmund continued. That day, the following day. He paused. I hope that doesn't seem strange. I needed to see the kind of man you were when you weren't performing for anyone. I wasn't performing. No, Edmund said. That was rather the point. He opened the briefcase himself. Inside was a single envelope. I've spent 52 years making decisions about where to direct capital, Edmund said. I've made some mistakes. Mostly I've gotten better at one thing. He set the envelope on the table between them. Recognizing where resources will be honored. Liam looked at the envelope but did not pick it up. What is this? Open it. Inside was a 2-page trust document and a certified check. He read the amount once, set the papers down, and read the amount a second time, $14 million. The waiting room was very quiet. From the bays, the radio murmured something about highway conditions north of Prince Albert. Liam was aware of his own heartbeat in an odd, distant way. There's been a mistake, he said. There hasn't. I fixed a wheel bearing. I charged $220 and didn't get paid. You did far more than that, Edmund said. But the wheel bearing is where I started paying attention, yes. He leaned forward slightly. I have been building a foundation for 11 years. The structure is in place. The endowment is funded. What I have not been able to find until this week is the person I want to lead it. Liam stared at him. I'm a mechanic. You're a man who patches a teenager's tire and asks for nothing. You're a man who reduces an invoice for a woman on a pension without being asked. You're a man who, when treated with contempt, goes back to work and teaches his daughter something worth knowing. Edmund paused. I've interviewed executives, social workers, public servants, academics. None of them have passed the tests you pass every single day without knowing you're being tested. Liam set the check down carefully on the table. His hands were not entirely steady. Wren arrived with Mrs. Pollock at 9:15, 20 minutes earlier than expected. She walked through the shop door into the waiting area, saw her father sitting across from a white-haired man she didn't recognize, and stopped. Sorry, she said. I can wait in the back. No, Liam said. Come here. She came to stand beside him, looking at Edmund with the calm, direct attention she brought to things she hadn't decided about yet. Edmund looked at her with something that might have been recognition. She glanced at her father, then back at Edmund. How do you know my name? I've been learning about your family, he said. He said it simply, without trying to make it sound less unusual than it was. Your father is a very good man. Wren considered this. I know, she said. He doesn't always charge enough, though. Edmund laughed, a real laugh, short and genuine. Liam looked at his daughter. That's the only complaint anyone seems to have, Edmund said. He reached into the briefcase and placed a second document on the table. This one outlined the Foundation's mandate. Skills training programs for young people who weren't going to university. Support networks for single parents navigating the gap between crisis and stability. Veterans transportation assistance. Emergency funds for families in the kind of situation where one broken furnace or one missed paycheck became something much larger. As Liam read, he felt something shift in his chest. Not quite the way he expected. Not excitement, exactly. Something quieter, like recognition. You don't need to decide today, Edmund said. Take the week. Liam looked up. Why me, really? Beyond what you observed. Edmund was quiet for a moment. My father was a pharmacist, he said. He never had money. He had the trust of everyone in his neighborhood, and when he died, people who had known him for 30 years came to his funeral and said he had changed their lives. I spent a long time thinking that was a beautiful thing that didn't pay the bills. He paused. I've been spending the last 15 years trying to build something that makes it pay the bills. That honors it. Because there are people like my father everywhere, and they run out of resources, and the world doesn't always notice. He looked at Liam directly. You're one of them. I'd like to give you the resources. The room was quiet. Wren, who had been reading the Foundation document over her father's arm, looked up. Dad, she said. Yeah, Mom would say yes. Liam looked at her. She looked back, steady and certain. Outside, a car passed. The radio in the bay finished one song and started another. The fluorescent light above Bay 2 flickered once, the way it always did, and held. 3 weeks later, Diane Ashworth drove back to Moose Jaw on a Thursday morning. She came alone, no assistant, no phone calls during the drive. She had practiced what she wanted to say a dozen times and was not at all sure she would say it right when the moment came. She found Liam in the bay, the same as the first time. She put an envelope on the counter. Inside was $220, plus an additional $80 she had added without quite being able to articulate why, and a handwritten note, 2 paragraphs that had taken her 4 drafts. In the note, she said that she had behaved as though other people's work existed at her convenience, and she had been wrong. She said she had done it more times than she wanted to count, and that she was still figuring out what to do with that. She said she was sorry. Liam read it once. He put it down. Thank you for coming back, he said. She had expected something harder from him. The absence of it was more uncomfortable than criticism would have been. My father told me what he's doing, she said. With the Foundation. He told me you'd find out. She nodded. I wanted you to know that I think he's right. To trust you. She said it plainly, without decoration, and Liam understood it had cost her something. Everybody makes mistakes, he said. What matters is what happens next. She left a few minutes later. He watched the Range Rover pull out onto the street and disappear around the corner. Wren was at school. The shop was quiet. Liam stood at the front window for a moment the way he had the first time, looking at the ordinary parking lot, the frost-edged sidewalk, the gray Saskatchewan sky doing its patient thing above the rooftops. Then he went back to work. The Ashworth Community Foundation officially opened its Saskatchewan office in February, in a refurbished building 2 streets from Liam's shop. He ran it with the same unhurried care he brought to everything. Showing up early, listening before deciding, treating every family that walked through the door as though their problem was the most important one in the building. Because, for that hour, it was. The first year, 412 families received some form of assistance. Young people who had never considered a trade found pathways into work that changed everything. Veterans who had been managing on too little for too long found some of the weight lifted. On the day of the official opening, Wren stood beside Liam during the ribbon cutting in her good coat, the one Karen had picked out 2 Christmases before she died. Edmund stood on Liam's other side. A small crowd of townspeople had gathered, some of whom Liam had known for years, some of whom he was meeting for the first time. A reporter from the local paper asked Liam what he thought had led to this moment. He thought about it honestly before answering. "I just tried to do the job right," he said. "Every time, even when it didn't make much difference." He did not say the rest of what he was thinking. He did not say that sometimes doing the job right was the only thing a person had control over, and that the world did not always notice, but occasionally, on an ordinary Wednesday in October, with the cold coming in from the north, it did. Wren noticed him smile slightly after the reporter moved on. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," he said. "Your mom would have liked this." Wren looked out at the crowd and the building and the February light coming off the snow and thought that was probably true. "She would have told you to charge more, though," she said. Liam laughed, and the sound of it carried out into the cold, clean air of a town that had quietly, without anyone planning it, become a better place.